But let's now get a little bit into the decision that all of us have had to make at some point using Atlassian. And it doesn't matter if you are an organization that's managing 15 users or you're managing 10,000 users. There are several things here to take into account. And let's go through a couple of the options and we'll deliver the pros and cons and help you understand, especially if you need help building a business case to get help here. This is something that we always support our customers with as well. But Dan, let's talk about the first, kind of the most primitive, but the option that everyone thinks they can just survive on, especially when they first get to
Yeah.
Atlassian Cloud, and that's the manual export. Tell me about your perspective. Tell me about your experiences with manual exports and what that looked like for you.
Okay. Manual exports are pretty much, well, I mean, first of all, they are exactly what they say. They're entirely manual. There's no automated process. You have to choose whether attachments are included. You have to click the button. You then have to download once the backups take the XML is taken. You then have to choose where you're going to store that from a longevity perspective. And if there's any restoration that is required for DR or anything like that, you're the one that has to go back in and re-upload and do all that kind of work. They are great for one purpose, and that is ad hoc. That is what they are designed for, really. They are not like a long-term solution. And if that's unfortunately where a lot of companies are, then hopefully we can find something better. But my experience, especially with some of the Atlassian ones, is that they are troublesome. I could be choose my words slightly better, but they're definitely troublesome. And when I have gone ahead and we've done some of these like large cleanups, and we've tried to remake sites healthy because we're a multi-site tenant. And we've gone through this process and we've taken the exports. They've often corrupted, which is where we've then said, okay, well, we'll take a backup just in case. We'll go ahead and delete whatever we need, and if we've then got the backup. We have actually run into this issue. This is exactly how I found HYCU in the first place, when we ran into this issue. But I deleted. Team said, actually, we needed that data. I said, not a problem. We've got a backup. I'll restore the backup and take it. Turns out the backup corrupted. And then that was it. Then we go on this 3.5 month Atlassian support ticket in order to try and retrieve any data from the corruption. Then they had to go through their backups. They had to do like a rollback, take out data, put it back to where it was, and it was a massive nightmare. It is not the route I would advise anyone to do as a long-term solution.
No, absolutely. And I tell folks usually manual is the most expensive of the free options that you have because of the
Yep.
highly corruptible nature of it too. And there's a couple things too
We've
that
spoken entirely on the fact that human error. If you are ill and you are responsible for taking the backup, it doesn't happen because you're ill. That's immediately an issue.
some of the probably the most eye-opening conversations I had, Dan, was uh, met a financial institution that had just moved to cloud. And we were asking questions. It wasn't even a product conversation about Haiku. It was a general conversation at Teams. And I asked them how they were managing backups. And the person blatantly stated, well, Thursday mornings, I do my manual exports. This is a serious financial institution. And what's scary about that is obviously there is a very highly paid person who's spending a lot of time manually exporting data to a hard drive. The export of the instance to the hard drive is not encrypted, so there's already a security flaw in there as well. And all of a sudden, like you mentioned, that person goes on leave, on vacation, gets fired. The organization has a point of failure and cannot even recover, assuming the hard drive is kept in good condition and the backup wasn't corrupted. It's
There's a lot of if, buts, and maybes that come into play when you're dealing with manual exports.
exactly, and as we talked about how critical Atlassian really has become, especially when it comes to DevOps and especially across ITSM, this is no longer something that's negligible in the organization. So one of the things that we can recommend, no matter what you choose and how you approach backups, I always recommend to avoid any type of manual exports as much as you can. This is the most error prone, and will be the most expensive option for your organization when it comes to the consequences of downtime, data loss, and also rebuilding. That's the scariest part of how long is it going to actually take you to rebuild, especially after a much more hardcore deletion scenario. But then comes the second, and I say quote unquote free because nothing is free. It's actually leveraging APIs to script your own backups. Now, this is already much better than a manual approach. It really is. But once again, there are different consequences to this. One of the main consequences is it requires to build, to schedule, and to maintain these scripts. This sounds easy, but not to folks who've actually had to do this regularly. This is a very, very challenging thing that takes a lot of hours. Most admins are rewarded and looking to seek career advancement by building cool things and optimizing, not spending hours and hours trying to keep the lights on.
No, technical debt is a big issue, a big challenge, and it's a big challenge for any actual technical people, because no one wants to be doing it for a start. And obviously, like you said, there's a big process in which you have to analyze the cost of maintenance versus the actual gain and the price that you're going to pay get for it. But it's a massive risk for businesses in general. The more technical debt they have, the higher risk that things can go wrong, knowledge will get lost, coding languages go out of date. There's so many different levels of technical debt that no one wants to be doing these things.
Exactly. And if you're aware that you have to perform backups and script them for Jira, you have to do it for JSM. You have to do it for your Git repository. You have to do it for other ones. I always use that Rube Goldberg machine because it's a perfect example of how quickly complex scripting can become just to perform bulk exports of your data as well. That's one challenge, the amount of time and resources. But once again, Dan, you and I have already talked about this, which is you still cannot perform granular recoveries. You are
No.
still performing a full bulk recovery. What does that actually mean? We're going to get into that in a second, but it still doesn't give you any enhanced recovery capabilities. You are still essentially finding a needle in a haystack every single time somebody deletes a needle. And once again, it's not policy based. It's a script, it's a dump. This for organizations, healthcare, financial services, where you have to have backup policies, this is really a non-starter as well. So these are some of the consequences that I'm seeing, some of the challenges with this. But I want to dive in a little bit more. And I will show everyone the math if you would like to see it, and we can follow up on a conversation. But my engineering team and I, we went in and we did a little bit of analysis, and we took Dan at a fairly large instance, a couple thousand users, and what it would actually take to effectively build a backups via script that met the needs of the company that exported the data or regularly moved that data to Amazon S3. From a starting perspective, it would be at least 250 man hours a year just to get started. 250 man hours a year. This is not accounting for mistakes. This is not accounting for anything else. It is just time making sure that you can do the basic activity of moving data from your instance to an S3 bucket somewhere else. And that is already a challenge. But the most expensive component here is time consuming bulk recovery. When you're talking about, especially if you're an organization, we run into customers with millions and millions of objects. Having to restore an entire instance to a sandbox and then parse and find the exact thing that was deleted, assuming you know what was deleted exactly by name, is going to be a very expensive process. And of course, it only works for a specific application. But Dan, one of the questions I had for you was a lot of the times this makes total sense to an administrator, even the director, even the head of productivity within IT. But sometimes it's very hard to make a business case to explain this to an executive in order to get budget to be able to say, look, I need help. I need to automate this. What's your perspective, Ben? How do you approach this? How do you try to help build a business case or explain to people just how critical the information inside Jira is?
So when you're dealing with, I think that this is a true for a vast number that I think the stereotype would work, which is the higher up you go, the less emotion can be involved in the conversation. So you have to be able to say, the usual example is let's go for one full working day and let me break it down also by hour. And you're in both of those examples, you would have to say, what's the average cost of like a user? So, if the system went down and therefore the average cost of a person is, um, £100 for that period of time, then then it scales up. If you got 1,000, then you're already, approaching £10,000 for just an hour. If you got 10,000 users, you can see how quickly that escalates. Um, and then you start saying, okay, well, we can do something and it's going to cost us this to maintain it, or we go and buy something and it does it for us and it's going to cost us this. And when you start dealing with very factual information, it becomes a lot easier to have that conversation. When you go in and say, I'm tired of doing this, I don't want to do this anymore, that's not the approach that's going to win you the case.
That is very, very, very good feedback, both on avoiding becoming emotional, because this can be a very, very painful thing. It's very easy to become emotional, especially when some folks don't understand how painful it is.
Yeah,
One of the things I recommend too, Dan, is not to get too in the weeds of the technology either.
don't need to. You just need to state, we can build it and it would work roughly like we'll take it on this date, it does this and it stores it there. Or you pay an app and it does that all for us. And that's all they need to know. They just need to know high level an approach and what's it going to cost the business, and also what is it going to cost the business if it don't do it. That's the more easier that's the easiest route to get some money, because if you say that if we do nothing and you spend zero, the cost of doing that is going to be 100 grand for a day. They're not going to want to pay 100 grand. And honestly, for
Exactly.
most software development companies, it's not 100 grand. You're talking millions. So
100%. And there's also the qualitative angles too, right? There's the, what would this do to our customer experience if we couldn't get this information in 8 hours? What would this
absolutely.
do to employee productivity? One thing I always recommend too is there are multiple stakeholders that will care about this in your organization. There's the CIO, but there's also the CISO. And if you're in a highly regulated organization, a CISO becoming aware of this, of the shared responsibility, and where that data is located and where it's stored or where it's not stored, that is also a massive opportunity to be able to get support. Because if you're able to get support to protect Jira, you're going to get support for your entire DevOps workflow and ITSM as well.